Tū taua mai i ranga, tū taua mai i raro, tū taua mai i waho, tū taua mai i roto. Kia tau ai te mori tū, te mori ora ki te katoa. Haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Sarah Holden, Director of Oxygen Consulting, and I have the pleasure of being your MC this morning as we launch the 2026 Insights on Aotearoa New Zealand Sustainability Professionals Report. Now, this is the seventh year we've been running this research. It started as a fairly simple idea to understand what it actually meant to work in sustainability in New Zealand, the pay, the pathways, the day-to-day reality of the role. 7 years on, it's become the only study of its kind in the country and something really useful to one much wider group of people than we ever expected. Businesses, students, recruiters, and of course, the sustainability professionals themselves. I want to set up one idea before we get into the findings because I think it sits underneath a lot of what you'll hear about today. Sustainability at its core is about an organisation's ability to sustain itself, to manage its dependencies on natural systems, on its people, on relationships, and on its own financial resilience. And the professionals who are thriving are increasingly the ones who can make that case in the language of the business. What you'll see in today's data is a profession that's grown up. It's more visible, more strategic, more embedded in the core of the organisation than it ever has been over the past few years. But it's also a profession under real pressure. We're growing up and we're starting to burn out a bit at the same time, and that's a real challenge for the sustainability of our own profession. So let's get into it. Kelly Flatt's our Senior Sustainability Consultant at Oxygen Consulting, who also actually leads this research for us, I'd add. She'll shortly take us through this year's research findings. Then we'll dive straight into the panel Q&A with our wonderful research partners. Please use the Q&A function to ask your curly questions. That way you can catch our panel off guard and I don't need to ask them the questions that we've pre-planned. But seriously, I'm really looking forward to leveraging our panelists' deep industry knowledge and their experience in the sustainability profession. So please don't hesitate to offer your questions through the Q&A function. Right, over to you, Kelly.
Thanks, Sarah, and kia ora everyone. I'm Kelly. It's a pleasure to present the results this year. As Sarah mentioned, I have been involved in this research for quite a while, so it's nice to be on the other side of this, and I hope everyone gets something out of it. So let's get into it. So first and foremost, since 2023, our research has focused on sharing insights at both an aggregate level, so the total profession, and across three different role types: generals, specialists, and additionals. General roles, they focus broadly on managing the organization's sustainability agenda. These are your sustainability managers, your heads of, etc. You definitely know them. Specialists provide specialist expertise on sustainability, either in in-house or external consulting roles. And additionals are those that focus mostly on other professions or other activities, but have some sustainability activities involved in their role. In 2026, those predominantly included communications, customer service, operations, and sales, for example. I do encourage you to reference the full report to understand more about these role types. We don't dive in too much about these today. We have covered them in the past. But everything in the report to do with what activities are involved in their roles and also the competencies they require are in the full report. So moving straight into the insights now. First, the organisations that are employing sustainability professionals. They continue to work in large organisations, with nearly half working in organisations with over 1,000 employees, and mostly in the private or public sector. I want to emphasise that these really are New Zealand's largest organisations that are employing sustainability professionals. And the agriculture, forestry and fishing, electricity, gas, water and waste services, management, consulting, and education and training industries are our biggest employers, and together employ roughly half of all professionals. You'll see that most role types can be found in nearly any industry, but there are some concentrations. For example, transport, postal, and warehousing employs a lot of generals, and management consulting hires a lot of specialists. And here we're looking at the tenure of sustainability professionals, both in their current roles, so how long they've been in their current role on the left, but also how long they've been in the profession itself on the right. What we've observed in the last year is a decrease in the number of professionals moving into new roles, whether that be in their current organisation or into a new organisation altogether. We've also observed a very small number of new professionals entering the industry completely. We can see this in the continued decline in the number of professionals that have been in their current role for less than a year, and an increase in those that have been in their roles for longer periods of time. This could be telling us multiple things. One, that the sustainability has been maturing and settling over time, so less movement. Two, that job insecurity is on the rise. Three, that demand for sustainability professionals is slowing down and there is less jobs available. And four, that there are limited growth opportunities within organisations. We do know that over 80% of professionals still can't identify a clear development pathway in their organisation, and that's highlighted on the screen as well. Now moving to remuneration, we know that this is an important topic for many. Overall, unfortunately, remuneration is down in 2026 year on year. You can see that on the left graph there. This being the average remuneration of the total profession, so everyone that took part, and it's a little over 141,000. At the sector level, on the right, the charity and public sector have increased on average, and at the NGO, not-for-profit and private sector level, they've decreased on average. Now moving to management level, by management level, pay momentum has stalled, except for consultants and advisors. This graph here is one of my favourite graphs, has shown the median remuneration of each management level since 2020. This data represents different remuneration bands, which are in $19,000 increments, and that is important to understand when looking at this graph. Most management levels have either decreased or stayed the same since 2025. Some have not observed any change for many years. That's mostly relevant at the junior level. However, despite this, 66 of professionals did receive a pay increase over the last year, with an average change of 2.1 to 3%, beating inflation across a similar period. For these people, this was primarily achieved within the same role, and that's followed by transitioning into a new role and transitioning into an external role. 29% of professionals observed no change in their pay, and 5% observed a decrease year on year. So what this shows is that while strong remuneration growth that we might have seen in the past has stalled across most management levels, which was shown in the previous graph, two-thirds have received a pay increase, just not enough to jump up a band. And moving now to training and development, it is important to preface before I go into this that a high proportion of sustainability professionals feel as though they have the necessary competency to undertake their roles today, which is great. However, many sustainability professionals continue to struggle to keep up with the training and professional development required for their role. We've seen this for many years now. While nearly all professionals consider training and development important, only 40% feel they can keep up with the training their roles require. Specialists are also feeling this more than generals and additionals, despite finding it more important. Unfortunately, not all professionals are receiving support from the organisations to undertake professional training. Only 62% are aware they have budget for this, 24% have no budget, and 14% are actually not sure if they have budget for this. Participation in professional sustainability training and development has also fallen to a 4-year low, sitting at just 27% this year. And it's also important to note that in this context, we're talking about professional sustainability courses, gaining formal accreditations, and completing qualifications. With this in mind, we were interested in understanding how sustainability professionals have developed their capability over the last year. What you see here, primarily on the right, is that learning on the job remains by far the most common way sustainability professionals develop their capability. This is followed by networking, podcasts, webinars, and research and literature. Just over half of professionals have told us that this is enough to manage the sustainability activities and develop the competencies required for their role. Over the past few years, we have asked sustainability professionals to identify any perceived gaps in the current training and development options to further understand this. In total, 40% identified at least one gap. The most cited included technical skills, mostly in environmental areas, commercial and financial acumen, strategic influence and communication, project delivery and governance, Te Ao Māori competency, and sector-specific and advanced training. To me, this reflects the breadth of the modern sustainability role and the number of skills required to undertake them, and that perhaps the skills that we think of as sustainability specific aren't the ones we necessarily should be focusing on currently. Now moving on to well-being, and this is the last section that we'll cover today. Since 2021, we have asked sustainability professionals what they broadly think about the world and the issues we face. Professionals are still more likely than not to hold a negative view that if we will overcome our collective challenges. However, this has plateaued over the last 3 years. Professionals are also more likely than not to believe environmental issues are getting worse or much worse. For context, 4 in 10 think they are getting much worse. Since 2025, we have also began asking professionals about how climate change impacts their well-being. In 2026, all professionals, except those aged 18 to 25 and those over 65, are experiencing slightly more well-being impacts than they were the year before. Sustainability professionals continue to report well-being measures broadly in line with, if not slightly better, than all other professionals in New Zealand. Here you will see work demands, job stress, job satisfaction, and work-life balance compared to the wider New Zealand workforce. The closing gap between sustainability professionals and everyone else suggests we are all experiencing a very similar work environment. Here you will also see emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and turnover intentions compared with everyone else. Again, quite similar. What we have been seeing, though, is turnover intentions creeping up slowly since 2022, with little difference now between sustainability professionals and everyone else. We've also highlighted that 1 in 2 18 to 25-year-olds are considering leaving New Zealand, a challenge we know is not unique to our profession. And with that, that concludes the insights, at least for this presentation. Again, the report does cover a lot more. This was just a bit of a highlights reel. And I will hand it back to Sarah now and our research partners to discuss the findings and what this might mean. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kelly. That was fantastic. And there's a lot in there. So I do encourage you, if you haven't already jumped on our website, grab a hold of that report and dig into the detail. But before we jump into the panel, I really want to pull out one thing that kind of strikes me the most. For 7 years, the story of this research has largely been one of a profession establishing itself. It's been proving that it belonged, earning its seat, and on most of those measures, the job is done. The roles are embedded, confidence is up, well-being is holding, and in a lot of ways, the profession has actually arrived. But what struck me most about this year is the gap between the training that's available to sustainability professionals and what that role actually demands of them now. Because when you look at where people say the gaps are, things like commercial and financial acumen, strategic influence, the ability to make the case in the language of the business, it's a description of a role that's changing underneath us. The sustainability professional of 5 years ago was, in a lot of organisations, a doer and a reporter. The data is now pointing to something closer to a strategist, someone who has influence, someone who can speak commercially, who has to connect what they do to the core of the business more than ever before. In the training, the development, the career pathways, they haven't really caught up with that shift. The role is evolving faster than the support around it, I think. So the question I'd put to us today isn't really how do we train people better? It's what is the role actually becoming, and are we building the profession to match? So that's where I'd like to start with our panel. I first of all like to welcome Rachel Brown, CEO of SBN, Mike Burrell, CEO of Sustainable Business Council, and Mario Lips-Wiemer, Professor of Ethics and Sustainability Leadership, Business School Management at AUT. So I will start with Mario if I can. Mario, how are tertiary education providers like AUT preparing sustainability graduates to gain employment, balancing theory and practical preparedness?
Okay, that was my third question, so I'm just preparing myself for that for a little bit. Um, so what there is a difference between the different institutions. So almost all of them in business school now have a broad ESG course that all students have to take. Then you find certain institutions such as AUT that if you do, say, finance, you also need to do a sustainable finance course. If you do accounting, you need to do sustainable reporting. If you do management, you need to do a social impact course, those type of things. So that is kind of all, that is all kind of the basic stuff. Where I think universities are increasingly aiming is at postgraduate level. And if I talk about what we are doing in our Masters of Business, which is the research degree, and our MBAs, in our professional masters, which is like for engineers, etc., who come back, it is all a core course. There's nobody that we graduate from a business school that does not have sustainability anymore. In those, they learn things like reporting, system thinking, circular economy, supply chain, production management, but also, and that's I think what you are talking about, how we increasingly need different leadership models, different structures, different forms of collaboration. That comes up a lot at the moment, and we have a lot of guest speakers from all the organizations that the audience today is part of. And a few things that really come out is also like how do organizations in New Zealand collaborate better to move the system as a whole along, and what kind of skills do we need for that, and therefore the upward influencing skills, but also taking our space or our role, if you like, and asking questions also of governance of, hey, what are we actually lobbying for? Because if we don't know, then we could be seen to be greenwashing, or all those sort. What is actually a long-term 10-year transitioning plan? Because if we don't know as sustainability officers, we don't know. So it's also that kind of upward influencing that we spend quite a bit of time on. So that is just combined, and thank God, with a lot of very willing guest lecturers who bring in their expertise as well of these roles as they are currently happening in New Zealand.
Great, thank you, Mario. I'm going to jump to a question from Jess Roger for Mike. What is SBC doing to close the gap between training required versus training available, especially for more advanced sustainability professionals who have been in the space for a while?
That's a really good question, Sarah. First of all, can I just say I agree wholeheartedly with your observation around the fact that this profession is evolving very quickly. I was at a meeting in Montreux earlier this year where we were discussing, what is a sustainability professional today, and we still have sustainability generalists, but we now have a lot more specialists and commercial acumen and business acumen in general are the things that people are looking for. So that changes the nature of the kind of skills that we need to train for, and also the sorts of people that we need to attract into the profession. I think that we've taken quite a narrow definition of sustainability for a while now, and we need to broaden that out more. So what that means for SBC really is looking to a lot more on the job training and how we can support companies to provide that, and also to bring people in who can work with sustainability professionals to essentially help them with their, if you like, their commercial acumen. There's nothing like being in the boardroom and hearing the hard facts of what a company has to deliver on and realizing that your work needs to be relevant to those commercial imperatives. So we'll be doing a lot more of that work as well. And also, obviously, we'll continue to work with SBN in terms of the sorts of training that we do, that they provide for us with advanced courses in sustainability as well. So I think it is a time for us to be looking at ourselves and saying, well, what else could we be doing, both for the professionals we have now, but also for the professionals that we need to attract in.
Mm. Do you think there's also a role for businesses to, given, I guess, the need for sustainability professionals to be so much more, have so much more commercial acumen with the businesses that they're working within? Should the businesses also have a level of responsibility for bringing their sustainability professionals into that broader context and actually supporting them in that space?
I think that's right, Sarah. And I think we're seeing it with leading companies that for a while now have been embedding sustainability within their core business strategy and realize that actually we don't do this because it's cute. We do it because it's really good for profit. What is sustainability? It's about taking a medium to long-term view, scanning the horizon, looking for those risks, looking for those opportunities, and then bringing that back into the business. So actually having a person at the top table that naturally does that is really good for the business. Similarly, it's very good for that person or that group of people to see the really hard commercial trade-offs that have to be taken, particularly during challenging economic times. So I think that's right. That's another thing that we're already beginning to start to see that with businesses, but we'll be encouraging other businesses to do more of that.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to flick to a question to Rachel. This is quite a broad question. I do have another more specific question, but what advice would you give to someone wanting to start a career in sustainability?
Good question. I think that we have essentially failed in the sustainability space to really do the leadership we need to do. And I think what we need now, not just amongst those who are actively care and are in this space, but for new people, when we're looking at how do we build this future we're talking about that's circular, that's low carbon, that embraces Te Ao Māori, that's regenerating nature. When you look at all of the roles that we need, we don't really need more advocates. We've got advocates galore in this space, but what we really need is, and I think Mike was kind of referencing this before, is people who understand capital flows, people understand where it's going, where it's coming, where it's heading. And also, from the work we do and the next research, the next wave, if you're bored, read that. The other point that is really missing is markets. How do we generally shift the way that you and I purchase, use, run, live, all of those kind of things? Because until the markets really shift, you saw that happening with biofuels, with Z Energy when that came out, couldn't get the market to buy into it. Unless that shifts, it's really hard to do. So you need capital plus markets, and then we know that policy needs to wrap around it because at the moment, most of the really innovative organisations are pushing against those three barriers to try and make change happen. So anyone who's new and wants skills, don't spend all your time learning about sustainability. If you get it, you get it. Spend your time understanding those other pieces so that we've got that skill set that's got finance, business models, partnerships, modelling, energy, or water systems, all of those kind of things. But also people who understand community because who are we when our communities fail? We need to make sure they're there. So I do think we need really good skills. I was listening to Shamabeel the other day who was saying whenever we hit recessions, we get more conservative in our leadership. We've seen that for sure. But we also stop investing in skills, and we're hearing that. We stop investing in marketing. We stop telling our stories. So these are bad times to pull back. So those are all the skills, Sarah. Lots of them.
And so for a sustainability professional sitting inside an organisation, if they are feeling like they have a gap, I mean, obviously there's some fantastic courses and training that you guys all offer. If they're feeling like there's a gap in something commercially oriented, whether that be strategic skills, financial acumen, how might they best go about kind of raising that within their own organisation and starting to get more capability in that space?
Yeah, see, I've always thought of sustainability people as the connectors in organisations. So they're often generalists. The trick is to try and get people on your side. If you're not mates with the CFO, if you're not mates with all the senior team or the strategists, then you're always going to be this marginal role in an organisation. So you've really got to make friends and also be a really good builder of the argument internally. So if they're doing it on their own, they're going to fail. If they're doing it with others, they're going to do it much more effectively because we all have a limited pool of knowledge. the more that we share, the more that we link arms internally, the better it's going to be. So I'd say it's that, really. You probably haven't really got the buy-in that you need internally, and that probably needs to be where you put all your effort. The other thing is I'm really skeptical about how effective our reporting has ended up being, which I know a lot of people in, those larger organizations spend their time doing. I really wonder if we AI a lot of that stuff and spend a much more time focusing on now what the hell do we do? Because that was the same conversation we had last year, and I don't think it's shifted. How do we resource it? What's the business model?
Yeah.
Rachel, would I be able to build on what you've just said? Because I 100% agree with everything you've just said. And two things strike me. One is we've got a new set of skills that we're going to require in our sustainability leads, which is in adaptation. We are going to have to be able to adapt while we also drive down emissions and deal with inequality and deal with the challenges to nature. And so that's going to be another skill set that I feel that we are underperforming in here in New Zealand. I see it in other countries, they're doing it better. So I suppose to come back to what should young people be looking for? Look at that. The truth is that New Zealand is going to have to go through a massive adaptation transition. So I think that's one. And the second piece, just speaking to the last point that you made around reporting, I couldn't agree more. I think in a way we became a bit obsessed with reporting and perfection being the enemy of the good, right? Good enough is good enough, and get on with the doing. In my view, reporting should take no more than 5% of your job. If it's taking more than that, then what are you doing? Just keep it simple, keep it crisp, really to the point so that you've got a lot more time for the doing. So I just wanted to sort of agree with everything you're saying, really.
Okay, can I jump back in again? The other point that I wanted, Mike, you're great. The other point I wanted to make was this idea of intergenerational long thinking, Sarah. And I think a lot of us just do very short-term thinking. We've seen that now in the recession. People are comfortable going back to their knitting. They're not sticking to what they were doing before. And I think there's a lot of movement happening, particularly in the UK, around community wealth building. I don't know if you guys have heard that, but it's really about I am part of a wider system. What's my role as a large or small organisation in helping the wider system, which also gets us to think about how do we tax things, what's happening with our long-term investment from infrastructure through to, skills, and attracting our young people to stay and participate. I think all of those things are the skills we need. Back to you, Sarah.
Great. I was just actually going to add a challenge to that. I 100% believe in the intergenerational approach, but I think what a lot of sustainability professionals face inside organizations is their business strategies are set up for a year, and a lot of the kind of longer term thinking gets kind of pulled back to this microscopic here and now focus. So how do we kind of begin to push that longer term thinking amidst that kind of business as usual situation that a lot of sustainability professionals are facing?
Yeah, well, first of all, Sarah, that isn't a 1 year strategy is a plan. That's not a strategy. It's not a strategy. Strategies need to be long plays. And I think New Zealand doesn't do well. I don't think we do that well at a political level. I think, Asian nations are doing it much better than we are. Some European nations do it much better. But if you've got a really clear long play plan, Te Ao Māori thinking does a much better job of this. You play out the long game. You don't just try and win the short ones, but you know where you're heading. You've got the investment lined up, like we do when we co-own places. Like I'm part of a co-housing thing. We all think long term about when the roof needs fixing, what's happening, and it's 20-year plans. But they should be longer for a country like ours. And then how you fit in that structure. If you're planning to be around for 100 years, you should be thinking 100 years. If you're a short game, you're only here for a short period of time. I get it. Think short term, but most of us want to play a longer game than that.
Great. Okay, I'm going to jump to one of the questions in the Q&A.
Can I just say one thing, though?
Sure.
I do. We are doing a long-term research project comparing sustainability offices in the Netherlands and in New Zealand, and And people go, yeah, that's not in European and all is well, and it's so much easier there. It's not. It's Netherlands also has had 20 years of incredibly unstable government. It also has very, very angry farmers. Very angry farmers. So yeah, people look at these environments and go, well, that is then easier there. And I don't think it is. What I see all those sustainability officers doing very differently is that they collaborate a lot more, that they do a lot more interdisciplinary work, that they do much more system thinking, that they are much more capable to explain their transitionary plans. They can just rattle them off, basically. And that they make a lot more noise, but collectively. They are much more in that mode. We get a bad government for sustainability's sake. And they go, well, we can't legitimize that by just saying we will carry on. We just won't make as much noise about it. They'll actually go, well, then we'll need to make more noise about what we're actually doing. There are differences. I just want to say that in some similar environments, and yes, different culturally, the Dutch are outspoken for better or for worse. We know that. But there are also different choices made by sustainability officers and the profession in different environments at the moment. And I think we just need to be aware of that too. What choices are we making currently? What do we hold ourselves responsible for? Is it incremental change, or is it, because that is the business argument does often inadvertently, it's not that people want that, but lead to incremental change initiatives. And that's fine. That's really important, and that often can also lead to innovation and so on. But also, how do we keep the ball on the much more transformational, eyes on the ball of the much more transformational change that does need to be done? So I just want to say that there is different responses also in different countries to the current situation.
And are you finding, just a follow-on question, I know you've done a lot of research overseas on the sustainability profession. Are you seeing similar trends in terms of the findings that we are, in terms of well-being, the roles, evolution of the roles in that data as well?
Yeah, I think overall what everybody's talking about is that the gap between what we do and what we need to do is present in every conversation and almost in every sustainability officer's thoughts. And therefore, that sustainability officers often still have that sense of holding themselves personally responsible for that, and that weighs on people. It weighs on our shoulders, that gap, I think. Whereas it's a collective responsibility, obviously, which is also why I'm really wanting to advocate, talk to each other, find and raise that collective voice. Because if we, so yeah, definitely that's there. I think what I cannot say, because we are really the only country that has done this now for 7 years. So yeah, pat on the back for you, for also Sarah, for keeping it going, because it's unique research. What I'm not finding so much. See, one of the things that we haven't talked about today is if we have fewer sustainability officers or fewer people in those roles, or even if we change the labels of their roles and they become risk managers or what have you, then the sustainability officers we do have, there's two conclusions. Either we do less sustainability, or the ones we do have need to do more work. So it's going to be interesting. I just think, again, that our sustainability officers need to think about. Are you inevitably ending up doing less, or are you needing every year to do a little bit more if it's not that well resourced? Just something to think about.
Mario? I'm going to jump into the Q&A. We have Hussein, who is a graduating master's student in business sustainability. So Hussein wants to ensure their skill set matches where the market is going, not just where it has been. So this is a question I'm going to throw to Mike and possibly Rachel as well, having a breadth of understanding and insight to lots of your business members. What do you think might be the single biggest skill gap, if you can say one thing about what organisations are facing right now trying to scale sustainability?
That's a big question. The first thing I'd say is I think hybrid skills are the skills to have. Coming back to Rachel's point before, you want to be very adept sustainability professional and something else. because if you're going to have influence, it's probably going to be through your something else, whether that's because you're a senior engineer or whether that's because you're a CFO or working for the CFO. You want to be where the decisions are made, and that's all about capital allocation. That's all about risk. That's about how close to the board you are, all of those sorts of things. So it is really about understanding that these roles ultimately are business leadership roles. And so you have to have that full suite of business leadership skills, I think. Get that commerce degree, get that advanced MBA, get that that degree in whatever you think will get you close to the top and the levers that you need, particularly as your career advances, to be able to affect change. There's nothing like being there. The second thing I would say is that the skill set that is really missing in New Zealand are some of the technical skills that we still need to import. And by that, I mean the skills that are required for execution on these very, very large transitional plans that have to be put in place. Let's take a very simple one. If you're in the business in a business that has basically used fossil fuel industrial heat process heat for the last 50 to 100 years, you're in trouble, right? You've got to transition away from that. You've got to move to electricity, or you've got to move to biofuels or other forms of energy. You're going to need people who can help you make those decisions to move there. And they're currently, because New Zealand hasn't been going through that transition, but other countries have been, we've had to import many of those skills. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. But there is a deficit here in New Zealand. And as this accelerates, and it is going to accelerate because this is now inevitable. Why? Because it's cheaper, more cost effective, and better for business resilience to be able to move towards these different energy systems. So what would I be advising my kids, as I am advising them to do, and they're not listening to me, but that's fine, that's where the money's going to be. Ronnie Biggs's thing, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Well, where are businesses going? That's where they're going. They're going to, how do we allocate very significant amounts of resource and capital to these transitions? And those are the skills that I would be looking at, because frankly, that's what New Zealand is going to need. This transition is huge. It's unprecedented. Well, it is precedented. It's as large as when Maori first settled New Zealand. It's as large as when the British colonised the country. This is the third largest big transition that we will go through as a nation state. So it's just very significant. And where do you look for those ideas? Look at other countries that are already doing it. Look to Australia, for example. Look to parts of Europe. Look to China to see what the future looks like. That's what the future looks like, and those are the skills we'll need.
Great.
Can I build on that?
Yeah.
Beautifully explained, Mike. I think, though, that the other skill, because AI is going to pick up a lot of the data, it's going to pick up a lot of the transition and the information that we'll be able to capture. So I wouldn't put too much effort into things that are going to be replaced. I still think the human skill set is the skill set that we have to get really bloody good at. So making friends with the people in your organization, but also making friends outside of your organizations, because, no organization on its own, I've said this for years, is going to change a system. You need to work out how to work with the system. The other thing I think would be a skill set to try and work for is how do we decouple the sustainability agenda with politics? Because that should just be a done deal. The whole conversation about inequality, climate, nature, all of those things need to be decoupled from politics. So if we can try and create it's just the way we do things here in Aotearoa, that would be really clever. But I think these are all human influence skills, friendship skills. It's about, getting AI to do the things that it does better than we do. Pooling data, writing fucking sustainability reports, for example. Get those off your plate so that we can spend more time with each other doing the mahi that needs to be come, especially with an aging population. We have to try and work out how to do things more efficiently, better, faster, because we've just been lagging for a long time. Yeah. It's exciting. It's really exciting. And we need all the young brains.
Absolutely.
Can I then add something very small to that? As I already said, that is the way that universities, and certainly ours, has gone. We teach the standard degrees and then add the hybrid skills. And that is a better way possibly than having a sustainability degree. On the other hand, when we speak to our students, our accountants, our engineers, our marketing people, the management people, when they come into these organizations, there is not always an awareness that they have already built many of these skills now, that they actually do have these skills that Mike is talking about. I mean, we're even teaching a whole course on adaptive leadership at the moment, like we are too moving, and these young kids are moving, not just through their education, but everything else that they are exposed to. And I think they're sometimes still treated as empty vessels that organizations need to be put things into, rather than that they come with a set of starting knowledge and energy, a lot of energy, to put some of this stuff. So yeah, I just say give them a chance, these young people, with all these skills that they come in with.
I'd also just say, again, building on those two comments, is that the social sciences and the liberal arts they're going to come into their own again. They already are coming into their own. It's to Rachel's point. This is stuff around trust, around humans collaborating, that you can't replace with machines. In fact, it will drive us together, because there will be issues that come up, because when you have interfaces that is human, machine, human, that becomes a problem. So I think that, interestingly enough, it was one of our business leaders many years ago said, give me a history graduate over a business graduate any day. I think it might have been Bob Jones, wasn't it, Rachel, or something like that. And why? Because you learn to think outside the box. You understand the importance of history. You learn to think creatively. You learn to write. You learn to express yourself. But the other thing I would say is that the interpersonal skills piece is just going to become more and more important and more valued. That's the piece you will be valued for. And if you want a really good example of that, you just think about the times that we collaborate as a culture and as a country. That's when we achieve things. That's when we've achieved the big things. It's when we go into our silos. That's when we drive things down. I'm just going to put a little link. Is it okay if I put a little link, Sarah, to our recent report? That this is the companion document, I think, to this wonderful work that Sarah's doing, which is a Driving Sustainable Growth report, because it's just talking about what the opportunities will look like further down the road. Yep. And I agree. It's super exciting. This is the future.
Yeah, and well, speaking of human to human interaction, someone has a question. In fact, I can probably answer it myself. Is there an appetite for the sustainability professionals to form a specific sustainable professional body like nursing, social work, etc.? So I would actually point you to the International Society of Sustainability Professionals, ISSP. There is a chapter in New Zealand. It is dedicated to supporting the professionals themselves. I guess to kind of distinguish that from SBN and SBC, which is focused on the organisations and their professionals. This is specifically for sustainability professionals, their capability development, and obviously a lot of the kind of person-to-person support that I think is so important when it comes to being a sustainability professional. So do look that up. We also have, I think, Adam Weller is the lead in New Zealand on the ISSP chapter here in New Zealand. Anyone else wanted to comment on that?
I was just going to pick up that thing on trust, Sarah. I know you asked me to think about how you build trust. And I think one of the first things, we've all got friends whose organisations have been given a hard time over this climate reporting or false climate reporting. There's a lot of distrust. Trust is just plummeting at the moment, from government through to corporates through to a lot of us. And I think one of the things we've got to remind ourselves, the fact that there's a lot of distrust out there is because people care and they want to understand the truth. So distrust isn't something that we should think is unhealthy. I think it's actually a healthy signal, which is probably the opposite to how people feel about it when it's you that's getting hammered. But if we thought about it as people care about this, so don't see it as a thing you need to hide. See it as something that should get you out of your chair and talking to people to understand why they don't trust you or what's going on in their head that you're not meeting. Because I think, I remember years ago we worked with a fisheries organisation who were their staff used to take their t-shirts off when they left work, because if they went to the pub in their work t-shirts, somebody would give them a hard time. So they were getting more and more closed because they were too scared to talk about what they were doing. And the distrust was growing as a result. Like, there was a lot of good stuff happening internally. It wasn't easy, but they were trying to do it. And I think the more that we talk, particularly with the people that don't like what they think you're doing, it's more important and really does inform future thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes
Transparency,
it can
sharing.
feel like you're in a bit of an echo chamber when you're with your own kind, I should say. But it definitely does help to, I guess, understand all perspectives when it comes to this agenda, because you are going to be dealing with all perspective at an organisational level.
Can I
Okay,
just say just one quick response to the
yes.
question about professionalization and professional bodies? There is nothing stopping SBN, SBC, a couple of organizations like ours, and some senior sustainability professionals getting together and making a list of what are really now the basic requirements for all sustainability professionals, in the sense that we really don't want somebody to come out of their education anymore without understanding materiality, right? So, like, that's just a simple example. But I do think we do not have, like the accountancy profession, as you say, that as the app says, the chat says, and the teaching profession, yet a body. The moment you get that, the whole education system will be influenced by that body. You know, that say for accountants, the accountancy professionals will say these are the minimum requirements everybody that studies accountancy in New Zealand needs to meet. We may not get that, or we may get that in 10 years, but in the meantime, we could still agree on what those minimum requirements are. And I think that would be important to do.
Yeah. Can I just come in on that one, Mara? Because I think the XRB, the External Reporting Board, is kind of pseudo playing that role in the sense that if you're doing reporting, and you're in the accounting profession or associated professions, that actually does cover that, doesn't it? So I think there's a lot we could learn from that and extend it into things
Exactly.
beyond the non-financial. But yeah, there's a lot.
And have it in some public place so that also those employing those with sustainability skills have some sense of what
That's
are some
right.
basics.
And they are putting together I was going to say that XRB are obviously consulting on their standards for sustainability right now. So there is going to be a standard for well, it's not for the profession, it's for everybody actually. So that's the beginning of that, I think.
And I just want to acknowledge Jess's comment in here, which says, don't completely write off reporting. When I don't think any of us are, Jess. We're all saying reporting's good, but I think your point is completely right. It's all the stuff underneath the reporting that's really effective, particularly if it's not just in your own organisation, but if you're going outside of that to inform your reporting and inform where you sit in a system of change and that transition. I think that's where it's really important. So the reporting frameworks are all useful, and we put a shitload of effort into getting those right. It is only the big reporting organisations we're talking about. Most of New Zealand businesses are SMEs. A lot of them don't do this reporting. They're more visionary, the ones that we deal with anyway, more visionary, more disruptive, but they're in a different camp to the bigger organisations. And the small New Zealand company, backbone of New Zealand, is still trying to work out, what's my future? How long am I here for? As a business, when do I sell, or what's the contribution I make? And I think it's a really different, we need two different approaches for those organisations. SBN's really focused on them. SBC, the CL, the Climate Leaders Coalition, you're more focused on the large reporting type organisations. They're really different roles to play, but they need to play together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the reporting is simply the story that you're telling of the things that you're actually doing in the end. I just wanted to pick up a point that someone has made. Actually, it's one of the questions, but it does actually link back to Mike and others' points around having a standard for sustainability professionals. We don't have something like passing the bar for our profession like law does, or the accounting standard. Someone's asked a question, is there any specific course or degree that support and or form the sustainability professional as a disciplined profession in New Zealand? I know that there are a range of degrees that you can get through AUT and other universities, but does anyone have further comment on that one?
I mean, there are a few, Sarah. The University of Canterbury run them. Yeah, there's a bunch, and they're all different. Yeah, so I guess the thing is you'd have to have a look and scan across all of them, from the ones at AUT through the ones down in Christchurch, and work out which ones you think are going to be the right ones for your kind of brain.
Mm-hmm.
And your kind of interest, like Canterbury has one that is more community oriented, but as Mike said, maybe in business you might want to match sustainability knowledge more with a degree in a particular area of business, or you might want to really come at it from an environmental angle.
Yeah.
All of these are legit, all of these are good, and so there's not one standard way in.
No, that's right. I mean, there's the 4 master's programs, isn't there? There's the 5 master's programs, because there's obviously the one at AUT. There's the Masters of Sustainable Business at Otago. There's the Masters of Sustainable Futures and Innovation at Canterbury. Masters of Sustainability Development Goals at MDGs at Massey, which has been around for a long time. And then there's the Masters of Climate Change Science and Policy, which is more to the science piece. So those are the kind of named ones. But as you say, there's just so many other ways you could go about doing it. My tip would be, think about the kind of career you want to have and where you want to influence. Think about the degree set that would get you there, and speak to the people that you want to emulate. Recognizing Rachel's earlier point that the workforce is fundamentally shifting now. Now that we've got AI to kind of turbocharge a lot of the technical work, so you need to be conscious of that, and then ask yourself the question: will that plus the sustainability skills that I could pick up at that institution give me what I need going forward? I suspect everybody going forward is going to need a master's degree to do the kind of work to be influential at the board level. But as Rachel points out, that's only a small set of the number of companies we have in New Zealand. A vast majority are small and medium enterprises, and there it's probably going to be very particularly about that kind of business that you're going into.
Just on that, Mike, I'm just thinking, when I meet a lot of the sustainability professionals that are in disruptive, new, small, startup-y kind of organizations, I guess they probably wouldn't even describe themselves as sustainability professionals, to be honest, but they are, they are the innovators and disruptors with really clear purpose on the thing they're solving. I don't know that they would have any of the qualifications that we've just been talking about.
No.
They're really passionate. They might have a skill in design. I'm thinking of LOF at the moment, or, Critical, those kind of organizations that are trying to do something really, really different. And I think they can they're really visionary. They can see the gap. They know what needs to be solved. They've got the skills, or enough skills. They can bring in the support they need, and then they go. And I think the challenge for them in the SME space, anyone who's doing anything disruptive, is that you need to make sure you've got the funding around you, you've got the policy support mechanisms, and you've got that wider system supporting you. And that's where the rest of us come in. And at the moment, I think we haven't been, and we haven't been for a while. We've all gone internal. We're looking at what we're doing. We're not going, how do we lift the system and make that change? And I have to acknowledge NZI as being one of the few organisations that have actually gone, hey, we're sticking with this, and we're going to help, bring up those small and medium-sized disruptors and innovators into the play. It's, a lot of people have just sucked back on this in the last few years, and I think that's been really unhelpful. And I'm really encouraging you all to come back out and play, because there's a lot to be done.
Thanks, Rach. I'm just mindful of the time now. So I think we've got time for just sort of one last parting comment from each of our panelists. So we'll start with Mario.
Sorry, what would you like me? Yes, because I just put on the chat, the skills that are being taught in Europe, also as a response to the the increasingly ESRS reporting requirements. These requirements do actually drive skills development. So in that sense, again, I support everybody who says, yeah, reporting is really important. But these were the ones I just put in the chat at master's level. So what kind of next level skills to change the whole system would you want to create in any, can be at a university, but it can be anywhere. And these were some of the things that they came up with in terms of what they are learning, which is sustainable and transition finance, still the reporting, but how you use reporting in order to change systems influence and collaboration, just transition planning, partnership skills, moving the market, etc. So they are those higher level skills to change systems, I think. And in my perfect world, that is definitely what we would be moving to, because it would also create a platform for sustainability officers to come together and actually start planning collectively. Because I totally agree with Rachel. We have to do this. And we need to do it collectively. Nobody can do it by themselves. So it's also creating that platform where we move outside of our organization, say, how can we collectively start influencing the system? And what skills do we need for that?
Beautiful.
Great. Mike.
Thanks, Sarah. Hey, can I just again congratulate you and Oxygen for leading out on this work? It's incredibly helpful to us at SBC. It really gives us a lot of insight, and it actually influences our strategy and our planning. So just a huge amount of kudos to you and to the Oxygen team, because I think this is great work. And it's also great to be able to collaborate with SBN and with AUT in the space, because I think it's one of those areas where it brings us all together and gets us thinking. I suppose my takeaway would be just two things, really. The first is that we are at an inflection point in history. I think we will look back at this very much. It's one of those very critical moments in time where things are happening very rapidly. That means that the key to that game is flexibility and recognizing that you don't even know what these opportunities might yet look like, but they're going to open up. And some of them will be in the entrepreneurial space that Rachel was describing earlier. Some of them will be in the corporate space, and some of them will be in between them. I think, which brings me to my second point. I think we have a tendency in New Zealand, even more now post-COVID, to be quite isolationist, and we're seeing this globally, right?
Yeah.
I really say to young professionals, you must get overseas for a period of time and engage in countries that are already doing these things, and then please come back with your significant other if you've got them at that point, and come back to New Zealand and bring those skills here and that knowledge here, because that's how we've always jumped ahead. There's an enormous amount happening globally, a lot of it happening in Asia, huge amount happening in North and Southeast Asia and Southern Asia. And so please do go and do that, because there's a limit to what you can learn when your country is at the lower end of this curve that we're talking about here. If you can go to a place which is actually driving ahead and then bring that knowledge back, oh my goodness, you'll be so useful to New Zealand, and the leadership you'll be able to show, I think, will be fantastic. Pair that together with the learning you can do here, and it's gold.
Beautiful. And Rachel, final word from you.
Absolutely love what you do, Sarah. So supporting what Mike just said, I'm sure we all agree. For me, it's really get away from your computers, get in front of humans, come network, play. And, every time I talk to people in this space, they're all saying, my personal view is this, my professional view, I could never say this way, whatever. Well, these places you can come together and you can say what you really think about things without getting into trouble with your bosses or whoever it is. And I think that's really important. We are, as Mike says, we're in a massive transformation. I don't think we should underplay the values that Te Ao Māori bring into this. I think that's really important, that we should really stop and learn. If we haven't done that learning, we really need to, because I think that should be informing the future of Aotearoa more than everything else. It's slower, it's intergenerational, it's caring, it's a we, not I game, and that's what we're in now.
That is a wonderful note to end on. And I just want to thank our incredible partners, SBC, SBN, and AUT, for their continued support on our research. We truly do value your input. And I also want to acknowledge the excellent work my team continues to do this year. Kelly Flats and Mava Ord, just incredible work to continue to lift the findings and continue to provide these insights to the profession. And thanks to all the sustainability professionals who participate in this research each year, and also obviously for your incredible mahi you do in your respective organisations. So if you haven't already downloaded a copy of our 2026 report, please do jump on the Oxygen Consulting website. It's free and ready for your perusal. No mai I ngā hua o te wananga, o te mahitahi, o te whakararo nui, kia pupuri, kia whakamaua, kia tēnā, haumie, huie, taekie.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.